Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. I have already spoken more than once about the Easter eggs hidden by the creators of the Harry Potter films for attentive viewers familiar with the books. These details never run out. Each rewatch reveals new references. Today we'll look at 10 more little things that are almost impossible to notice without knowledge of the original source. The films themselves never emphasize them, so viewers who haven't read the books will hardly catch the meaning. But true fans will certainly appreciate these hidden hints. Enjoy the video. Number 1. A real fan. Ron Weasley's favorite Quidditch team is the Chudley Cannons. In the books, this fact is highlighted constantly. His room is covered with posters of players in bright orange robes. His bedding, and even the ceiling, reflect his devoted fandom. In the films, however, this detail is almost completely absent. Still, attentive viewers might have caught a reference at the beginning of the Goblet of Fire. When Harry wakes from his nightmare, Ron is seen sleeping under an orange blanket with the letters Lee visible, part of the word Chudley. A poster of the team also hangs by his bed. It's not the full richness of the canon, but at least a small sprinkle of authenticity. Number 2. Black's compensation. After the events with Scabbers, who turned out to be Pettigrew, Ron was left without a pet. In the books, Sirius Black makes amends by gifting the boy a little owl, later named Pigwidgeon. The bird was noisy, funny, and nothing like a proper grown-up owl, but it quickly became part of the team. This touching episode never made it into the films, though there is a small nod to it. In The Half-Blood Prince, a tiny owl can be spotted in the Weasley house in the background. It appears only a couple of times, but attentive fans instantly recognize the familiar character unfairly erased from the screen adaptations. Number 3. Filch's oddities. In The Half-Blood Prince, Hogwarts caretaker is seen using an object that might look to many like a Muggle metal detector. During the luggage inspection scene, Filch waves around the device, which seems more like a trinket from our world than a magical tool. In reality, it's a reference to the secrecy sensor, an artifact readers first encountered in the Goblet of Fire. In the books, the caretaker constantly checked students with it, hoping to uncover banned objects and magical contraband. In the films, however, the device appears just once, almost hidden, serving as a little Easter egg for the most observant. Number 4. The Magical Fire. In Deathly Hallows, Part 1, a strange flame in a glass jar appears on screen. Harry tests the new wand he received from Ron on it. For viewers unfamiliar with the books, it may seem like nothing more than a decorative prop, but fans know immediately that this is Hermione's Bluebell Flames, first shown as far back as the Philosopher's Stone. She could conjure blue fire, carry it around in a jar, and use it as a portable source of warmth. In the film, this magic appears without explanation, but dedicated fans recognize it right away as a beloved trick that accompanied the trio for years. Number 5. As good as the Muggles. The magical world often feels disconnected from progress. Parchment instead of paper, no electricity, and letters sent by owls. Yet sometimes wizards have their own inventions just as advanced as those of Muggles. One such creation is the omnioculars, magical binoculars for Quidditch fans. They allow spectators to zoom in on the action, slow down plays, replay moments, and even receive commentary during the match. In the books, Harry buys 3 pairs, for himself, Ron, and Hermione. In the films, omnioculars can only be spotted in Ron's hands during the Goblet of Fire. The scene is short, but it's a delightful reward for careful readers. Number 6. Hermione's homework. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, there is a blink-and-you'll-miss-it detail during a classroom scene. Hermione sits at her desk, surrounded by scrolls filled with tight, neat handwriting. To most viewers, they are just scraps of parchment, background dressing for the set. But readers know better. These are her famous notes, the lifeline for Ron and Harry. Rowling often showed that the boys managed homework and exams only because Hermione was willing to share her meticulous work. One moment from Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban captures this perfectly. "I've got a whole essay on transfiguration," Hermione says briskly, handing over a roll of parchment. "You can copy it if you like, but not word for word." It is a line that defines her, brilliant, bossy, yet always loyal. The tiny glimpse of those scrolls in the film is a quiet nod to the girl who carried not just her own grades, but her friends' futures, with ink and parchment. Number 7. Rita Skeeter's newspapers. Rita Skeeter makes her grand entrance in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, quill in hand, ready to twist every word. In the film, her role is trimmed down, but the Daily Prophet still carries her sting. If you pause during the scenes where the paper is shown, the articles are not random. The text mentions Harry's supposed disturbed state of mind and questions his ability to compete in the Triwizard Tournament. These lines echo the same manipulative tone that Rowling gave her in the book. The novel paints the picture vividly. Rowling writes, Harry Potter's fame is wearing rather thin. A boy who relies on wild stories and public sympathy rather than true talent. Rita never reports the truth. She invents, she twists, she makes readers doubt. In the story, Hermione becomes her favorite target, branded as Harry's secret love interest and homewrecker. For Harry, the most painful blow is reading lies about himself while the entire school whispers. The filmmakers captured this cruelty in a subtle way. Most viewers saw only moving headlines and dramatic pictures, but fans who looked closer found Skeeter's words embedded in the text, almost word for word from the novel. It was a hidden tribute to her poisonous style. Rita Skeeter may have had less screen time, but her quill still scratched deep enough to remind book lovers of every cruel article. Number 8. Ginny's subtle revenge. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, there is a moment that passes almost unnoticed. Professor Horace Slughorn praises Harry for his sudden brilliance in potions class. The camera briefly shifts, and Ginny Weasley, sitting nearby, lets out the smallest smile. It is not the shy, quiet expression the films often give her. It is knowing, playful, almost teasing. For readers of the books, this is the Ginny they remember, the girl who grew up with 6 older brothers and learned to use wit as both shield and weapon. Rowling showed Ginny's sharpness many times in the novels. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry snaps at her for talking about the Chamber of Secrets, Ginny fires back, "Well, that's a bit rich, coming from you." Her sarcasm silences him and proves that she refuses to be pushed aside. In another scene, she casually mocks Fred and George, turning their own jokes against them. These moments defined her as fiery, clever, and unafraid to challenge anyone, even Harry himself. The films rarely capture that strength, but this single smile in Slughorn's classroom feels like a secret gift for the readers. It tells us that Ginny knows Harry's sudden talent comes not from brilliance, but from the Half-Blood Prince's book. Her grin says what the script does not. She sees more than others notice. In that fleeting second, the book's Ginny shines through, reminding us of the bold, sarcastic, and confident character hidden beneath the quieter film version. Number 9. The Mystery of the Mirror. The Mirror of Erised first appears in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry stumbles upon it late at night and sees his parents looking back at him. It becomes one of the most emotional moments of the first book, showing not only Harry's deepest desire, but also the cruel emptiness of his childhood. In the film, the mirror is given the same treatment, a single appearance, a haunting image, and then it vanishes from the story. But attentive viewers of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix can spot the mirror again. In number 12, Grimmauld Place, stacked among dusty furniture and dark objects, there is a tall mirror leaning against the wall. To most, it looks like nothing more than an old piece of set decoration, yet readers of the books know what it really foreshadows. This is the mirror Sirius Black later gives Harry, a tool meant to connect them even when separated. Rowling writes in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, "I want you to have this, Harry. It might help you to contact me, if you need me." The tragic irony is that Harry never uses the mirror when he should. He keeps it hidden, thinking it unimportant, and only after Sirius's death does he realize what he has lost. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry looks at the broken shard and whispers, "Help me," hoping for a response. The mirror, once a symbol of longing, becomes a lifeline to Aberforth Dumbledore and a reminder of missed chances. The filmmakers, by slipping the mirror into the background at Grimmauld Place, created a visual thread that rewards the reader. They planted a clue for those who remembered Harry's first encounter with the mirror and understood its future importance. It is a quiet detail, easy to miss, but it turns a piece of furniture into a symbol of hope, grief, and destiny. Number 10. Dumbledore's elemental spells. When the battle erupts in the Ministry of Magic at the end of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the film delivers one of its most striking duels. Albus Dumbledore faces Lord Voldemort, and the air itself seems to bend to his will. Streams of fire lash out like whips. Water bursts from nowhere and crashes through the hall. To many viewers, this is just visual spectacle, but to readers, it is a deliberate echo of Rowling's description of Dumbledore's fighting style. He never relied on curses alone. He commanded the elements. Rowling captures this power in the book with almost biblical weight. It seemed that he was conjuring storm and fire and water with nothing but a flick of his hand, and even the darkest spells were lost in the tide. This is how Dumbledore fights, not with killing curses, but with creativity and mastery of magic at its core. The filmmakers brought that to the screen, showing him not as a soldier, but as a sorcerer who could shape nature itself. The contrast with Voldemort is telling. Voldemort throws deadly green light, the infamous killing curse, meant to end battles in a single stroke. Dumbledore counters with torrents of water, walls of flame, and chains of lightning. The difference reveals character. Voldemort seeks death and domination. Dumbledore, even in war, uses power to shield and restrain, never to kill outright. The visual clash becomes a reflection of their opposing philosophies. For fans of the books, that ministry duel was more than a fight. It was a moment where the films respected the text and captured something unique about Dumbledore. The elemental fury, the waves and sparks, reminded viewers why he was the only wizard Voldemort ever feared. And in those brief minutes, the screen showed not just a duel, but the embodiment of a truth Rowling hinted at all along. Dumbledore's strength came not from darker magic, but from his unmatched imagination. Number 11. The letters on Dumbledore's trunk. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, when Harry first steps into Dumbledore's office, there is a small detail that most viewers never notice. On a wooden trunk near the wall, 4 letters are carved, APWBD. The camera never lingers on it, yet the choice was deliberate. These are the initials of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. For readers of the books, the initials carry weight, because Rowling took care to make his full name sound ceremonial, as though it belonged to a man both eccentric and majestic. The full name appears in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire when Dumbledore introduces himself during the Tri-Wizard Tournament. Rowling writes, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. The moment feels almost humorous to the reader because of the unexpected Brian hidden among the grander names. It is one of the author's subtle jokes, and yet it adds a layer of humanity to a figure who often seemed larger than life. The initials on the trunk in the film are a sly wink to those who remember that passage. By placing the letters on screen, the filmmakers reward the most attentive fans. They do not explain them, nor draw attention with dialogue. Instead, the initials are simply there, carved into the set like a secret message. For anyone who knows the books, it becomes a moment of recognition, a reminder that Dumbledore is not only the wise headmaster, but also a man with a name as long and peculiar as his history. This detail also reinforces Dumbledore's personality. He never hides his oddities. He embraces them, whether by wearing flamboyant robes or by admitting to a fondness for Muggle sherbet lemons. His trunk, marked with APWBD, becomes another reflection of that pride. To ordinary viewers, it is only a box. To readers, it is a quiet confirmation that even the smallest corners of Hogwarts hold stories worth remembering. Number 12. Umbridge's cat plates. When Dolores Umbridge first appears in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, one of the strangest details is her office. The walls are covered with decorative plates, each one showing a kitten purring, pawing, or playing with a ball of yarn. For many viewers, this is nothing more than a bizarre piece of set design, meant to underline her eccentric and unsettling personality. Yet readers of the books recognize it as something far more significant, a visual hint at the core of her magical identity. J.K. Rowling revealed that Umbridge's Patronus is a silver cat, a detail that never makes it into the films. In the book, Harry witnesses this moment during Umbridge's trial at the Ministry. A silver cat with a long curled tail leapt down from the tip of her wand and landed on the floor. Rowling writes, "The creature strolls gracefully between the Dementors, driving them back with feline elegance. For anyone who had already noticed the kittens on her plates, the connection is unmistakable." The irony is striking. Cats are often symbols of warmth, independence, and even affection, but Umbridge uses the image of the cat not for kindness, but for control. The kittens on her wall look harmless, but in reality, they are the mirror of her cold, watchful Patronus. In the world of Harry Potter, Patronuses often reflect a person's innermost self. For Harry, it is a stag, loyal and protective. For Snape, it is a doe, filled with memory and love. For Umbridge, the silver cat becomes the embodiment of her own slyness and calculated cruelty. This small detail in her office decor becomes much more chilling once the reader understands the truth. Every kitten plate is a reminder of her hidden power, disguised behind pink cardigans and a sugary smile. It is storytelling through background design. The filmmakers silently left a clue for sharp-eyed fans of the books. What looks like whimsy is actually a glimpse into the darkest part of Umbridge's soul. Number 13. The Flying Keyboard. In the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the famous scene of the dueling club is usually remembered for Harry and Draco's confrontation, the snake conjured between them, and the revelation of Harry's parcel tongue. Yet for the attentive eye, something else lingers in the background, quiet but deliberate. Just behind the rows of curious students and professors stands a piano, its keys rising and falling with invisible hands. It plays a delicate, haunting melody, unnoticed by most casual viewers, but instantly recognizable to readers of J.K. Rowling's books, who remember that Hogwarts was never silent. The castle itself, enchanted and alive, hummed with magic that seeped into every object, from the talking portraits to staircases that shifted at will. The piano is one of those fleeting visual nods, a small but intentional connection between the films and the layered texture of the novels. Rowling's descriptions in the books consistently remind us that Hogwarts is not merely a building, it is a living presence, filled with quirks that make it less a school and more a world unto itself. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when Harry returns to the Great Hall for the new year, Rowling notes that 1,000 candles were floating in midair over 4 long tables, illuminating the golden plates and goblets. This sense of constant, casual enchantment is everywhere. The enchanted instruments are part of this rhythm of life, sometimes in the background, sometimes a little closer to the action. The piano in the film becomes a subtle, visual translation of these details, an acknowledgement that for all the tension of dueling, Hogwarts is still a place where magic hums freely. Professor Phileas Flitwick, the diminutive charms master and head of Ravenclaw House, is the character most associated with enchanted music. While he appears in the films often as comic relief or as the stern arbiter of spells, the books give him a richer role. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Rowling writes, Professor Flitwick conducted the choir with great energy, and a group of toads sat croaking a bass line. That single passage encapsulates his eccentric love of magical instruments and the blending of charm work with artistry. He did not see magic only as utility. He saw it as joy, as performance, as something meant to bring delight. The flying piano in the dueling club scene, almost hidden behind the chaos, speaks directly to his influence. The filmmakers could easily have left the background bare, focusing only on Harry and Draco's tension, yet they chose to add this whimsical touch. This decision is telling. Chris Columbus, who directed the first 2 films, often leaned into the playful side of Hogwarts, filling the frames with moving staircases, mischievous ghosts, and enchanted decorations. The piano is not a mistake or random set dressing. It is part of a consistent visual strategy to make Hogwarts feel alive. For a book fan, spotting the instrument feels like catching a wink from the filmmakers, a quiet reassurance that the world of the books had not been forgotten amidst the need to condense and streamline the story for cinema. The charm of the piano also lies in how it anchors Hogwarts in the traditions of old magical schools. In Rowling's imagination, music has a strong symbolic connection to magic itself. Dumbledore in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone remarks that, music, a magic beyond all we do here. For Dumbledore, music is not merely entertainment, but the purest form of enchantment. That belief runs through the school, whether in the raucous singing of the school song or in the quiet of the frog choir. The piano in the film is therefore not just an aesthetic choice. It is an embodiment of this theme, a reminder that music is part of the school's pulse. Number 14. Bill's werewolf scars. In the dimly lit hospital wing of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, there is a fleeting moment that only the most attentive eyes will catch. Bill Weasley lies on a bed, pale and exhausted, after the climactic battle at Hogwarts. He is injured, though the film never lingers on the true cause. The camera pans briefly across his face, and if one looks closely, faint scars line his cheek and neck. For casual viewers, this is simply the aftermath of battle. But for readers of J.K. Rowling's books, those scars carry a story that is both terrifying and deeply symbolic. They are the invisible remnants of Fenrir Greyback's savagery, and their presence in the film, however understated, is a secret nod to the fans who know what really happened. The books describe the attack in chilling detail. In the original text, after the Death Eaters invade Hogwarts, Greyback lunges at Bill and leaves him permanently scarred. Rowling writes, "But he's not a werewolf," Mrs. Weasley whispered. Greyback hadn't transformed, but the wounds are cursed. He may bear wolfish traits. That moment transforms Bill's character forever. His face is described as ravaged, his good looks ruined by deep claw marks and bites. This is no ordinary injury. It is a reminder of the thin boundary between human and beast in the wizarding world, and it shows how evil leaves its mark in ways that are both physical and psychological. In the film adaptation, however, the confrontation is absent. Greyback never dramatically mauls Bill on screen. The attack happens offstage, so to speak, and is only hinted at in passing dialogue. Fleur Delacour, with quiet dignity, declares that she still loves him despite the scars, but the audience never witnesses the ferocity of Greyback's assault. The scars are visible if one pauses the frame, but they are never explained in detail. For most moviegoers, this is a curious omission. Yet, for book readers, the faint lines across Bill's skin are enough to trigger the memory of that terrifying passage in the novel. It is a reward for careful attention, an Easter egg planted for the devoted. The significance of Bill's wounds in the books lies not in physical disfigurement alone, but in the strange half-state he is condemned to live with. Greyback's attack occurs when he is not transformed, and so Bill does not become a true werewolf. Still, Rowling explains that he acquires a liking for very rare stakes and certain mannerisms that hint at lupine instincts. It is a cruel curse, not enough to turn him, but enough to haunt him. That detail enriches Bill's character in the novels, shaping his relationship with Fleur, his family, and even his self-image. The films, in choosing to leave this arc understated, inadvertently created a hidden detail that only the loyal readers would recognize. The scars also serve as a mirror to another central figure in the series, Remus Lupin. Unlike Bill, Lupin was bitten as a child and condemned to a lifetime of transformations. His existence is marked by stigma, secrecy, and fear of rejection. When Bill is attacked, it is Lupin who steps in to explain what such a wound might mean. The books emphasize his quiet authority on the matter. He understands better than anyone what Greyback's victims endure. In this way, Bill's scars bridge his story with Lupin's, reminding the reader of the ever-present threat of prejudice and the cruel fate imposed by monsters like Greyback. The films lose much of this thematic weight, but they leave just enough for the discerning fan to piece it together. Number 15. The Marauder's Map and Hidden Names. Under the dim flicker of torches along the ancient stone corridors of Hogwarts, there is one magical object that has fascinated readers and viewers alike. A map so alive that even the castle itself seems to breathe through it. The Marauder's Map, first introduced in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, is more than parchment and ink. It is an artifact woven with secrets, crafted by 4 mischievous students, and filled with the kind of detail that rewards only the most attentive eyes. In the film adaptation, the map makes its debut in the Gryffindor common room, its parchment glowing as Harry whispers, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Yet it is not just Harry's delight at discovering hidden passages that lingers in memory. For those willing to pause and look closer, there is another layer, names running across the corridors, names that seem insignificant unless one remembers every page of J.K. Rowling's books. What makes this detail extraordinary is that the filmmakers could have created a generic illusion of moving footprints or simple shadows of nameless students. Instead, they chose to honor the richness of the novels by embedding familiar names into the shifting ink. It is not immediately obvious. In fact, most casual viewers never notice. But when the camera lingers for a brief moment, sharp-eyed fans freeze the frame and suddenly realize that the names belong to real students from Rowling's world. Among them is Susan Bones, a Hufflepuff student whose family plays a tragic role in the saga of Reich. Voldemort's Rise. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, she is sorted into Hufflepuff before the wide-eyed gaze of Harry. "Bones, Susan," Professor McGonagall calls out, and the young girl hurries forward. This small character, barely mentioned in the films, quietly appears on the Marauder's Map, her presence a nod to those who never forgot her story. Equally striking is the fleeting glimpse of Terry Boot, another student whose name surfaces in the books but remains entirely absent from the cinematic adaptations. Terry is a Ravenclaw, a quiet boy who becomes one of the earliest members of Dumbledore's army in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. The book captures this moment with simple clarity. Terry Boot, who was a Ravenclaw, raised his hand and asked whether they would be learning countercurses. In the films, he vanishes into the margins, erased for the sake of narrative economy. Yet when the Marauder's Map flickers across the screen, his name runs down a corridor, proof that his existence still mattered to the filmmakers. It is a detail invisible in passing, but unforgettable once seen. These small gestures carry a weight far beyond their seconds of screen time. They show that the creators of the films understood the devotion of Rowling's readers. The Marauder's Map, after all, is a living representation of Hogwarts itself, a magical record of every student, professor, and ghost. If the map only showed the main characters, its magic would be shallow. But by including students like Susan Bones or Terry Boot, it mirrors the book's depth, where even or minor figures carry significance in the broader fight against darkness. It transforms a cinematic prop into an authentic echo of Rowling's universe. The Marauder's Map is already rich with lore. Created by Remus Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, Sirius Black, and James Potter, the map carries their mischief and genius in its very ink. When Lupin returns it to Harry later in the story, he explains its danger and its brilliance, a blend of knowledge and rebellion that only Hogwarts itself could inspire. In the book, Rowling describes it vividly. It was a map showing every detail of the Hogwarts castle and grounds, but the truly remarkable thing was the tiny ink figures moving about it, each labeled with a name. The films capture this magic, but the decision to add forgotten names makes it more than a simple adaptation. It becomes a love letter to the source material. Susan Bones's name carries its own weight of tragedy. Readers later learn in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix that she is the niece of Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Amelia is murdered by Voldemort himself, a chilling reminder of how deeply his terror reached into every family. Susan, though not central to the plot, represents the countless students whose lives were scarred by Voldemort's cruelty. When her name appears on the Marauder's Map in the film, it is like a whisper from the books. Remember her, remember the cost. To a fan, this fleeting image carries all the sorrow of her lineage and the bravery of those who survived. Terry Boot, in contrast, stands for resilience and learning. He is never given dramatic moments, yet his quiet contributions in Dumbledore's army embody the spirit of Rowling's world, that courage is not only found in chosen ones, but in ordinary students who decide to fight. When his name flashes across the Marauder's map, it is as though the film acknowledges that unseen courage. His invisibility in the main narrative becomes a metaphor for countless unsung heroes who risked everything during the war. There are other names as well, scattered across the parchment. Fans report glimpses of Ernie Macmillan, another Hufflepuff, who stood with Harry during darker times. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Ernie is convinced Harry is the heir of Slytherin, only to later apologize and pledge loyalty. "I'm sorry I ever suspected you, Harry. I hope you can forgive me." In the films, this subplot disappears, yet his name remains alive on the Marauder's map, a shadow of what might have been. Such details reward readers who remember not just Harry's story, but the stories of every student who filled those crowded halls. The artistry lies in how subtle the detail is. No one announces it. No character points at the map and says, "Look, there is Susan Bones." It exists as an Easter egg, a gift planted only for those who would care enough to search. This mirrors the map's own enchantment. Just as the Marauders hid secret passages and mischievous trails within the castle, the filmmakers hid secret truths within the map itself. To unlock them, one must have the same curiosity that drove Harry to explore the castle's depths. The Marauder's map also acts as a bridge between book readers and film audiences. For those who knew the books intimately, pausing the film becomes a way of reclaiming lost subplots, a chance to see that the characters who vanished in adaptation still breathe in the background. For film-only viewers, the map remains magical but incomplete. It is only when both mediums are combined, book knowledge and cinematic craft, that the full richness emerges. In this sense, the map is the perfect symbol of the Harry Potter experience, layered, hidden, waiting for discovery. Number 16. The Dwarf Cupid. Of all the festive moments that J.K. Rowling gave us in the books, one that stands out in sheer absurdity is Valentine's Day in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Readers remember it vividly because it is not only an embarrassment for Harry, but also one of the most bizarre decisions made by Gilderoy Lockhart. He insisted that the day become a school-wide celebration of love, draping the corridors in pink confetti and hearts, and hiring dwarfs dressed as cupids to deliver singing valentines to students. In the film adaptation, this detail is almost entirely gone. The camera only brushes past a few hearts in the background as the students walk the corridors, so subtle that most viewers never notice. Yet to fans of the books, this is not just a missing scene, but a quiet wink, a hidden acknowledgement that the filmmakers knew about Lockhart's antics and decided to hide them in plain sight. In the book, Rowling devotes an entire section to Lockhart's mad plan, the defense against the dark arts professor whose obsession with his own image was already clear, announced during breakfast that he had organized a little surprise for the school. He cheerfully declared, "I thought it would be nice to brighten things up a bit, and to spread a little love in gloomy times." What followed was nothing short of a nightmare for the students. At his command, a dozen surly-looking dwarfs dressed in golden wings and carrying harps roam the corridors, tackling students to the ground in order to deliver singing valentines. For Harry, who already had to endure constant stares for being the supposed heir of Slytherin, this became one of the most humiliating public moments of his school years. The scene reaches its peak when one of these dwarfs chases Harry down a crowded corridor. Harry tries to escape, but the dwarf insists, "Oi you, Harry Potter!" The dwarf pins him down and sings a mortifying poem written in a shaky, girlish hand. The words, remembered by every fan, go. "His eyes are as green as a fresh pickled toad. His hair is as dark as a blackboard. I wish he was mine, he's truly divine, the hero who conquered the Dark Lord." Ginny Weasley, red-faced and stammering, is revealed to be the author of this disastrous serenade. For book readers, this was both hilarious and tender, an early sign of Ginny's feelings for Harry, but also a source of endless embarrassment for him. When fans of the book watched the film adaptation of Chamber of Secrets, they waited for this scene, eager to see how the actors would carry off the ridiculousness of Lockhart's Cupids. Instead, the day passes in silence. We see no dwarfs, no public serenades, no humiliation. The Hogwarts we see on screen remains largely solemn, as though the filmmakers wanted to preserve the tone of mystery and danger surrounding the chamber itself. For many, this was a disappointment, as it removed one of the most memorable moments of comedy in the early books. Yet on closer inspection, attentive eyes notice something small. In one corridor scene, pink paper hearts are pinned to the walls, scattered almost casually among the usual stone and torchlight. For the casual viewer, this is nothing, but for those who know the text, this is an unmistakable nod to what was lost. The decision to omit the Valentine's Day spectacle was not random. Chris Columbus, the director of the first two films, often leaned toward restraint when it came to Rowling's more whimsical or absurd moments. He emphasized fidelity to the darker elements of the plot, the basilisk, the petrifications, the threat looming over Muggle-born students, and often chose to downplay comedy that might interrupt the tension. Including dwarfs in Cupid costumes running through Hogwarts hallways might have clashed tonally with the fear and suspicion enveloping the school at that time. Still, rather than cutting the holiday entirely, the filmmakers chose to sprinkle tiny decorations as a subtle Easter egg, a gift only readers would fully decode. It is this kind of detail that transforms the Harry Potter films into more than adaptations. They become layered texts in conversation with their source. The pink hearts scattered in the corridors tell the audience that the crew remembered Lockhart's madcap decision. It was not ignorance, but deliberate omission. By giving us the brief flash of decoration, they acknowledge that the book's version of events exists in the background, just out of frame. It is as if we are reminded that in this world, Lockhart probably did make an attempt to spread romance, but the camera chose not to linger on the chaos that followed. This kind of invisible storytelling rewards the careful reader who watches closely, allowing them to feel a private sense of recognition. The absence of the dwarf Cupid scene also changes the way audiences perceive Ginny's early relationship with Harry. In the book, her blushing presence after the Valentine is a key detail. Harry, humiliated in front of his peers, doesn't realize that Ginny is the author, but readers catch the significance. It plants the seed of her affection, long before it grows into their eventual romance in Half-Blood Prince. Without that moment, the films rely more on later cues to build their bond, leaving Ginny's crush more understated. For the fans who read the books first, this missing layer is noticeable, and the little pink hearts serve as a bittersweet reminder of what could have been. Lockhart himself also loses a shade of his ridiculousness without this Valentine's Day subplot. In the book, his vanity is practically boundless, and his willingness to turn an entire school day into a celebration of his idea of romance shows just how deluded he is. He even boasts about receiving no fewer than 46 Valentines himself. This not only humiliates Harry, but further establishes Lockhart as a comic fraud. The film, while still portraying him as vain and incompetent, never reaches that same extreme of absurdity. Kenneth Branagh's performance gives us charm and comedy, but the absence of his Valentine spectacle keeps him from tipping over into outright farce. Fans who notice the hearts in the background often describe it as a small thrill, the sort of secret handshake between the filmmakers and the readers. It confirms that someone on the design team cared enough to remember the text in detail. This kind of Easter egg is not uncommon in the Harry Potter films, where the set designers filled Hogwarts with hidden details, the moving portraits, the bookshelves lined with magical titles, the sly inscriptions on the Marauder's map. The Valentine's hearts belong to this same tradition, objects that enrich the world without drawing attention. Only those who know the books intimately can appreciate their significance, turning the act of watching into a treasure hunt. The choice to obscure the dwarfs rather than feature them also reflects a broader adaptation challenge. Rowling's world is filled with humor and absurdity, often running parallel to moments of danger and fear. Translating that balance to film requires decisions about what will resonate visually. A dwarf dressed as Cupid, singing about pickled toads, risks tipping into parody on screen. What is charmingly ridiculous in prose can become distracting when embodied by actors. The filmmakers clearly decided that the integrity of the darker storyline outweighed the comic potential of the Valentines. But by embedding the hearts in the corridors, they acknowledged the existence of that moment without risking tonal disruption. For readers who grew up with the books, this hidden reference is more than just a design detail. It becomes a reminder of how different the experience of the story can be between page and screen. The books give us the texture of Hogwarts life in all its messy, embarrassing detail. They show us Lockhart's vanity, Ginny's awkward crush, and Harry's relentless public scrutiny. The films, streamlined and serious, preserve the skeleton of the plot, but often trim away the tangles of everyday chaos. The hearts on the wall act like a ghost of the book version, whispering to us about what was left behind. The humor of that lost scene remains beloved. Fans still quote the poem, still laugh about the image of Harry being chased down by a determined dwarf. The absurdity is part of what makes the wizarding world feel alive, not just dark battles with serpents and shadows, but also silly, embarrassing school experiences that mirror our own. By removing it, the film loses a piece of Hogwarts' chaotic charm, yet because of those faint decorations, readers can still imagine the unseen. We can still believe that somewhere off camera, a dwarf with golden wings might be stalking the corridors, harp in hand, waiting to humiliate the boy who lived once more. Number 17. The Living Chess Set. Of all the scenes that define the beginning of Harry Potter's journey, few moments carried such weight and drama as the life-size game of wizard chess in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The stone chamber, cold and cavernous, became the stage for Ron Weasley's unexpected act of bravery, a sacrifice that set the tone for his character long before the larger wars unfolded. The black and white squares stretched before them like a battlefield, the looming carved pieces striking with real weapons, clattering and smashing to dust. Ron's voice rang with determination as he declared his move, knowing it meant he would be struck down so that Harry and Hermione could move forward. In the film, the crunch of stone and the sight of Ron collapsing remains one of the most memorable sequences, cementing wizard chess as more than just a child's game. It was courage, strategy, and sacrifice played out in physical form. Yet the films did more than simply recreate that dramatic scene. The filmmakers embedded smaller, subtler details that rewarded careful eyes and devoted fans of J.K. Rowling's novels. Nowhere is this clearer than in the later installments, when the trio find themselves spending time at the Burrow, the warm and chaotic Weasley home. The camera lingers on family dinners, bustling conversations, and cozy corners. But in those frames, half hidden in the clutter of the Weasley household, rests a tiny detail, a reduced, portable set of enchanted chess pieces that unmistakably mirrors the giant ones from that first adventure. The connection is rarely discussed, but it exists as a deliberate nod, one of those Easter eggs planted for the most devoted followers of both books and films. This detail matters because in Rowling's written world, wizard chess was not a one-time spectacle, but a continuing part of Ron's identity. From the very first Christmas at Hogwarts, when Harry received his own set of chessmen, Ron emerged as the unrivaled strategist. The books emphasize his skill, showing how his pieces often shouted at him, insulted his opponents, and even warned Harry against foolish moves. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the narration makes it clear. Harry learned quickly because the pieces shouted advice at him, which was rarely very good. Ron, on the other hand, knew what he was doing. The scene reveals both Ron's natural talent and the quirky life of the enchanted figures. They remembered mistakes, they sulked when ignored, and they developed distinct personalities that made each match feel like a conversation with an argumentative group of allies. The filmmakers could have left wizard chess behind after the grandeur of the first movie. It had already served its dramatic purpose in the protection of the stone. But instead, by including that reduced set in the burrow scenes, they acknowledged Ron's long-standing relationship with the game. It is not just a background object. It is a reminder that Ron continued to live with the habits and pastimes Rowling gave him, his love of strategy, his tendency to lose himself in games, and his reliance on wit rather than brute force are all folded neatly into the presence of those miniature chessmen. For the reader who knew how much Ron's pieces argued and remembered their battles, spotting the set in the films became a thrill, an affirmation that the adaptation respected the subtleties of the books. Consider how often wizard chess reappears in the novels, woven quietly into Ron's character arc. In Chamber of Secrets, the narrative recalls how Ron played matches with Harry during the holidays, his pieces still scolding their inexperienced opponent. In Goblet of Fire, as Harry wrestled with the tension of the Triwizard Tournament, chess became a pastime that brought some measure of normalcy to the chaos. And in Order of the Phoenix, Ron's stress about exams and Quidditch found its outlet at the chessboard. The persistence of the game in his life speaks volumes. While Harry leaned on Quidditch for relief, and Hermione buried herself in books, Ron's identity found rhythm in the calculated destruction and rebuilding of enchanted soldiers. What makes wizard chess unique is not only its violent realism, but also the way it reflects the personalities of its owners. Rowling hints that the pieces are not entirely independent. They adapt to the player who commands them. Ron's set, for instance, is aggressive and blunt, often bickering and issuing sharp retorts. Harry's borrowed set behaved differently, uncertain and hesitant, because Harry himself lacked confidence in the game, that magical quality that the tools of play echo the mind of the wizard, made Ron's mastery even more telling. His soldiers were quarrelsome, but they were loyal and respected his authority. This bond transformed chess into something more intimate than a mere hobby. It became an extension of Ron's voice and imagination, a canvas on which his tactical instincts could shine. When the film subtly shows the burrow cluttered with magical trinkets and artifacts, the presence of the chess set becomes a deliberate narrative anchor. The burrow is not just a home, it is the reflection of the Weasley family's spirit, where objects hum with memory and meaning. For Ron, the chessmen on the shelf are not silent decorations. They are echoes of past games, of moments with Harry and Hermione, of evenings when his strategies mattered. For the fan who knows the books, those miniature figures in the film carry all of that unseen weight. They remind us that these enchanted soldiers have lived through battles, arguments, and victories far away from the camera's focus. The moment gains even more significance when one recalls the nature of Ron's heroism. He was not the chosen one, nor the brightest witch of her age. He was the strategist, the boy who could see patterns in conflict and anticipate outcomes. In Philosopher's Stone, his sacrifice in the chess game proved his courage. In Deathly Hallows, his ability to think several moves ahead was essential in surviving on the run. That chess set, resting quietly in the burrow in the films, encapsulates that continuity. It tells viewers that Ron's growth was not accidental, but rooted in the skills he cultivated from childhood. The detail also underscores the care the filmmakers took in weaving together the vast world Rowling imagined. Not every object could be included, and many book moments were necessarily trimmed. Yet someone in the design department remembered Ron's identity and chose to slip in that chess set as a thread between the visual story and the written one. It is a gift to observant fans, a reassurance that even when storylines shifted, the characters remained grounded in the same traits readers loved. For those who only watched the films, the set might look like nothing more than another bit of Weasley clutter. But for the readers, it resonated as a symbol of continuity. In this way, the enchanted chess pieces act almost like characters in their own right, especially within the novels. They grumble, argue, and mutter under their breath, much like the Weasley twins or the portraits at Hogwarts. Their presence in the burrow scenes of the films, even if silent, evokes those book moments where the pieces criticized Harry's lack of foresight or advised Ron with rough loyalty. A viewer who remembers the line, "Stop mucking about, can't you see his nights wide open?" from the book smiles inwardly, recognizing that the small figures in the background have lived those lines even if they never speak them on screen. It is worth considering, too, how wizard chess foreshadowed Ron's eventual role in the war against Voldemort. Strategy, patience, and sacrifice were qualities that define the final battles. When Ron stood alongside Harry at the Battle of Hogwarts, he did not do so as comic relief or sidekick, but as a leader capable of seeing the larger picture. The chess game from the first book, mirrored by the set in later films, becomes a symbolic arc. From child's game to war strategy, from board pieces to real lives on the line, that continuity deepens the storytelling and reinforces Ron's essential role in the trio. The burrow, with its patched furniture and cluttered rooms, becomes the perfect place for such details to hide in plain sight. Every item in that house has a story, and the chess set is no exception. Viewers who pause, who examine the frames closely, discover that Rowling's world breathes even in the corners. It is a reward for devotion, a whisper that says, "If you know the books, you will see more than others see." It transforms the act of watching into a treasure hunt, where objects like a chess piece can carry the weight of entire chapters. Ultimately, the reduced set of wizard chess pieces in the films does more than nod to continuity. It reveals how adaptations can respect source material without shouting about it. It allows Ron to remain consistent across mediums, retaining his identity as the strategist, the boy whose confidence grew through games of destruction and rebuilding. And for the reader, spotting that set is like meeting an old friend in an unexpected place. It is a reminder that stories live not only in the grand gestures, but in the quiet, almost invisible details that carry meaning for those who know where to look. Number 18. Dark books on the shelves. In the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the scenes in Professor Horace Slughorn's office seem, at first, like nothing more than richly decorated background. The camera lingers briefly on velvet armchairs, cabinets full of crystal bottles, and shelves crowded with books. Most viewers simply take in the atmosphere, allowing the set to confirm Slughorn's reputation as a man who loves comfort, indulgence, and the appearance of sophistication. Yet, hidden in plain sight, observant fans of the novels notice something far more intriguing. Dusty tomes with gold-embossed spines, bearing titles that only a reader of J.K. Rowling's original works would recognize. Among them lies a subtle acknowledgement of the dangerous and forbidden knowledge lurking within Hogwarts, a detail that ties the cinematic universe back to the darker undertones of the books. When Rowling described Hogwarts' library in the novels, she paid particular attention to the restricted section. It was a place shrouded in mystery, locked away from the curious eyes of ordinary students, and protected by chains and signatures of professors. "You'll need a signed note from a teacher to look in there," Madame Pince tells Harry in The Philosopher's Stone. The reason was clear. Many of the books contain knowledge about the dark arts, instructions on curses and spells that could cause irreversible harm. Titles like The Secrets of the Darkest Art or Magic Most Evil were scattered throughout the shelves. These volumes haunted the periphery of Harry's adventures, and the memory of them lingers for readers long after the pages close. To place hints of such books on Slughorn's shelves was no accident. It was a deliberate gesture by the set designers to reward fans who knew exactly what those gold-embossed names meant. Take, for instance, the faint inscription that can be glimpsed on a spine, "The Dark Forces, a Guide to Self-Protection." In the books, this work by Quentin Trimble was mentioned during Harry's early years as a standard defense text. Its presence in Slughorn's office suggests a man who, while preferring luxury and soft chairs, understood the necessity of equipping himself against dangerous times. This detail matters because by the sixth film, The Beast So, Wizarding World is once again under siege by Voldemort's return. Slughorn's collection of tomes echoes not only the official curriculum, but also the unspoken truth that knowledge of the dark arts, however forbidden, is often needed to survive. Only a fan steeped in Rowling's lore would connect the quick flash of a title on screen to the greater story of Hogwarts' hidden library. Another book that can be faintly discerned is a reference to spells for beginning wizards. Though a simple and innocuous-sounding volume, its placement alongside darker works creates a striking contrast. It evokes the duality of Hogwarts itself, a place where the innocence of learning Wingardium Leviosa coexists with the shadow of curses like the Cruciatus and Avada Kedavra in the novels Harry and His Friends. Often straddle this line between light and dark, childlike wonder and adult danger. The set designers captured this contradiction visually, lining Slughorn's shelves with tomes that whisper of both beginnings and endings. For a casual viewer, it is decoration. For a devoted reader, it is a coded message that Rowling's world is far more layered than the camera reveals. The books in the restricted section were not only dangerous, but sometimes disturbingly alive. In the Chamber of Secrets, Harry recalls the time when a library book screamed loudly when opened, alerting Madame Pince and sending him running for cover. This unnerving image stayed with readers, reminding them that in the wizarding world, even knowledge itself could wound or betray. That sense of danger is embedded in the dusty volumes in Slughorn's office. They are silent in the film, their spines mute with age, yet the golden letters shimmer like warnings. To a fan, their presence conjures memories of Harry tiptoeing through the dark library with an invisibility cloak, risking exposure for the sake of secrets that might save lives. In The Half-Blood Prince, the theme of books as both salvation and corruption becomes even stronger. The potions textbook, annotated by the mysterious Half-Blood Prince, transforms Harry into a star student, but it also tempts him with sinister magic. The infamous spell, Sectum Sempra, written in those margins, nearly costs Draco Malfoy his life. The movie emphasizes this by showing the weight of old tomes around Slughorn, as if to suggest that every book holds two sides, the promise of mastery and the peril of misuse. When fans spotted the familiar names on the shelves, they recognized that the filmmakers were reinforcing the theme. Books can be as dangerous as any wand, and those who study them tread a fine line between brilliance and catastrophe. The golden letters are not there merely for decoration. They symbolize tradition. Rowling's universe thrives on the weight of history, the idea that every magical object carries centuries of stories. In The Order of the Phoenix, Hermione once scolded Harry, "Just because you've got the emotional range of a teaspoon doesn't mean we all have." Her constant reliance on books reminded readers that knowledge could illuminate a path forward, even when hope was scarce. The props in Slughorn's room echo Hermione's respect for texts, but with a darker tint. The tomes suggest that history itself cannot be cleansed, and even the most jovial professor has shelves lined with shadows. The artistry of the set designers must be acknowledged. They knew that attentive fans would pause a DVD or freeze a streaming frame to scrutinize the titles. By rewarding that devotion with authentic references, they created a bridge between reader and viewer. The title Moste Potente Potions, for instance, is one that appears in the Chamber of Secrets when Harry, Ron, and Hermione search for the polyjuice recipe. The mere sight of those words on screen is enough to spark recognition, pulling the audience back into the memory of three young students brewing a dangerous potion in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. These visual Easter eggs are not random. They are carefully planted roots that connect the film back to the soil of the original text. Slughorn himself, as a character, makes sense of this collection. He is a man of contradictions, both cowardly and brave, both selfish and generous. He hides from the Death Eaters, yet he once taught Tom Riddle about Horcruxes, knowledge that ultimately enabled Voldemort's darkest act. To see him surrounded by these books is to understand his nature. The gold-embossed spines glitter like trophies, but they also carry guilt. Fans who recognize titles from the restricted section cannot help but recall Slughorn's complicity in teaching Riddle about forbidden magic. His shelves, in this sense, are as much a confession as a library. In the novels, Dumbledore's own library was also full of secrets. In the Deathly Hallows, Hermione finds the Tales of Beetle the Bard among his belongings, a book that contains the story of the Deathly Hallows themselves. This parallel shows that every great wizard keeps shelves that are more than they appear. When the filmmakers dressed Slughorn's office with these titles, they were situating him within this tradition. Like Dumbledore, like Voldemort, like even Snape, he was a man whose fate was intertwined with the knowledge of books. The audience who recognized this detail understood that history repeats itself not only in battles, but in libraries. Consider also the way light strikes the spines in that scene. The camera does not linger, but the glimmer of gold against shadow creates an impression of temptation. It is almost biblical in symbolism, forbidden fruit resting in plain sight, waiting for someone reckless enough to reach for it. Rowling herself once described the restricted section as full of books that had information you weren't supposed to have. That tension between curiosity and obedience drives Harry throughout the series, and it is echoed silently in the shelves behind Slughorn. Fans notice because they remember the thrill of Harry sneaking past Pince with a lamp in hand. The power of such details lies in their ability to transform passive viewing into active discovery. A casual viewer may say, it is simply a professor's office, but the book fan whispers, that is Moste Potente Potions. That is the Dark Forces, a guide to self-protection. In doing so, they participate in the film in a way others cannot, layering memory upon image. The films thus reward loyalty to the books, creating an experience where two mediums enrich one another. Without this recognition, the scene passes as decoration. With it, the scene becomes charged with hidden meaning. One could even argue that these silent books are characters in their own right. Just as the Sorting Hat or the Marauder's map have voices and agency, so too do these tomes speak through implication. Their spines remind us that magic is a knowledge-based art, and knowledge always comes with danger. Rowling wrote, "Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain." The books in Slughorn's office are brain-like repositories of power, waiting for hands reckless enough to open them. To see their titles is to feel their presence, even if they never speak aloud. What makes this Easter egg remarkable is its subtlety. Unlike obvious fan service, these books are not highlighted with dramatic zoom or pointed commentary. They wait, quiet, patient, much like the volumes in the restricted section themselves. To notice them is to prove one's kinship with Hermione, whose eyes for detail and memory for titles made her indispensable. Fans who spot these names know they have been initiated into a deeper layer of the story, not unlike students sneaking into forbidden places. The reward is not only recognition, but a sense of belonging to Rowling's world more fully. Ultimately, these golden-lettered spines in Slughorn's office serve as a reminder of what the Harry Potter series has always emphasized. Knowledge is power, and power is dangerous. The films, though streamlined and adapted, chose to echo this truth in small ways. They knew that fans of the novels would be watching closely, ready to grasp the faintest allusion. And so the books sit there, silent, glowing faintly in the background, whispering to those who know the stories well. They are proof that the filmmakers respected the depth of Rowling's creation, embedding pieces of the restricted section where only the devoted would see. Number 19. Lucky Charm on the Broom. In the fourth film of the Harry Potter series, The Goblet of Fire, there is a moment so fleeting that the casual viewer will likely miss it altogether. During the first task of the Triwizard Tournament, when Harry mounts his broom to face the Hungarian Horntail, the camera briefly lingers on the handle of his Nimbus 2000. There, tied neatly to the shaft, is a tiny charm in the shape of an animal's ear, small and almost whimsical. It seems like an odd choice for a prop, a meaningless trinket that most audiences would disregard as set dressing. Yet for readers of J.K. Rowling's books, the detail carries an echo of authenticity, a subtle nod to a tradition deeply woven into wizarding culture. The belief in lucky talismans and charms at Quidditch matches and other high-stakes competitions. The novels never describe Harry as one to rely on such tokens. He is brave, reckless, and far too focused on instinct to think about superstitious practices. But the books do not shy away from showing the quirks of the magical community when it comes to games and contests. Ron Weasley, always quick to bring the atmosphere of Hogwarts Quidditch stands to life, once explained that fans would wear strange hats, paint their faces, and wave enchanted objects to give their teams an advantage. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix Rolling Rights, Ron had taken to carrying around a tiny model of a Chudley Cannons player that roared and waved its arms every time he scored in practice. This love of silly symbols extended beyond the Weasleys. Wizards and witches of all ages delighted in surrounding their players with small offerings of luck, protection, and bravado. The filmmakers seem to have remembered this aspect of wizarding culture and decided to weave it quietly into the cinematic language. The amulet on Harry's broom is a reminder that even though the Triwizard Tournament was dangerous and deadly serious, the spirit of magical traditions did not vanish. The object is not explained, nor is it the focus of any scene, but its placement suggests that Harry did not enter the arena entirely alone. Someone, whether Ron, Hermione, or perhaps even the twins, might have insisted he take a charm for good fortune. It is precisely the kind of thing the Weasley family would do, unable to fight the dragon for Harry, but desperate to send him into battle with a token of their support. This idea resonates with the readers who remember that Rowling often described the wizarding world as a place where ancient superstition coexisted with sophisticated spells. Students would study arithmancy and complex transfiguration by day, yet still carry rabbit's feet or enchanted coins to Quidditch matches. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire itself, Rowling described the World Cup stands as a carnival of eccentricity. Some of them had painted their faces with the colors of their teams. Others wore rosettes the size of dinner plates, and a group of wizards were marching up and down the rows, chanting loudly. Though the book does not linger on the notion of charms as physical objects, it establishes that sports and luck walked hand in hand in wizarding society. The visual cue of the little ear-shaped talisman is particularly striking because of its strangeness. Why an ear? In folklore, ears often symbolize listening, awareness, and attentiveness. Within the context of Quidditch or magical sports, it might have been imagined as a charm for sharp reflexes, the ability to hear danger or to notice subtle changes in the air. For Harry, who would be relying on every sense as he faced the dragon, such a token becomes symbolically appropriate. While the books never spell this out, the films frequently hid such symbolic flourishes in the background, allowing careful viewers to sense layers of meaning that echoed Rowling's themes. One can almost picture Ron thrusting the charm into Harry's hand backstage, insisting that it would bring him luck. Ron's devotion to Quidditch and his childish faith in rituals of fortune would make such a gesture believable. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, he admitted to Harry, "I always think the Cannons will win." His loyalty to a hopeless team was endearing, but it also showed how much he invested in the language of belief. It is not a stretch to imagine that when his best friend was about to face a dragon, Ron would cling to the only comfort he knew, those strange tokens that filled the stands at Quidditch matches. The filmmaker's choice to incorporate such an item demonstrates a rare respect for the culture that Rowling built across her novels. Film adaptations often compress or simplify details for the sake of pacing. Whole subplots vanish, characters are reduced to archetypes, and quirks of the wizarding world are left behind. Yet here, in the heat of one of the most intense sequences of the film, a tiny symbol remains. It does nothing to advance the plot, but it enriches the texture of the story. For fans of the books, it whispers, "This is the same world you read about, where magic is not only grand, but also small, personal, and tender." The Nimbus 2000 itself had become more than a broom for Harry. In the second book, it was destroyed during a Quidditch match by the Whomping Willow, and its loss devastated him. Professor McGonagall replaced it with a firebolt, yet the Nimbus was the broom that carried Harry through his first victories. Attaching a charm to it in the film recalls that personal bond. It suggests a merging of memories, of friendship, of Quidditch, of the times when magic was a game rather than a life-or-death struggle. The charm thus transforms the broom from a tool of survival into a vessel of hope. The cinematic language also reinforces how isolated Harry was at that moment. The Triwizard Tournament was designed to test champions alone, without help. Yet the presence of the charm contradicts the loneliness. It suggests that although Harry had to fight, he was still tethered to his friends through symbols. This idea echoes Dumbledore's wisdom in the series. You are protected, in short, by your ability to love. The charm does not cast spells or deflect fire, but it represents love disguised as superstition. In the mythology of Rowling's world, love itself was the most powerful charm of all. There is also a playful undertone to the inclusion. Fans who notice the talisman might remember Luna Lovegood, a character introduced in the same book, who wore radish earrings and carried her father's eccentric beliefs with pride. Luna embodied the strangeness of the magical community, where what seemed ridiculous often carried hidden truth. The ear on Harry's broom could be interpreted as a foreshadowing of Luna's influence, a reminder that in the wizarding world, odd objects were often the ones that mattered most. From a production standpoint, such details reveal how meticulously the design team approached the films. Costume designer Ginny and the props department often spoke of hiding nods to the books within the films. The Weasleys' knitted sweaters, the Black family tapestry, the moving portraits, all were carefully created to echo the richness of the source material. The ear talisman fits within this tradition of layering meaning into props. It was never meant to be noticed by everyone, only by the few who cared enough to look. The charm also becomes a silent metaphor for how fandom works. Most of the cinema audience will never spot it, but for those who do, it feels like a secret shared between the creators and the readers. It rewards attentiveness, much like Rowling's own writing, where throwaway lines in early books later revealed crucial significance. Just as readers felt vindicated for remembering that a character once borrowed a book or mentioned a peculiar name, film fans are rewarded for paying attention to what hangs from a broom. For many fans, this detail connects to the wider tradition of sports culture both in the wizarding world and in ours. Just as Muggle athletes might wear lucky socks, carry family photos, or cross themselves before a game, wizards embraced talismans that blurred the line between joke and genuine magic. Rowling herself used these details to show how similar the magical world was to the non-magical one. By placing such a charm on Harry's broom, the filmmakers underscored this universality of superstition and hope in sports. Ultimately, the ear on the Nimbus 2000 is a reminder that the Harry Potter films, even when cutting and reshaping the novels, sought to remain faithful to the spirit of Rowling's creation. It may not be as obvious as a spell duel or a grand revelation, but it is a heartbeat of authenticity, a whisper of the world that captivated millions. For those who love the books, it is proof that the filmmakers were listening, just as the ear itself listens, silently, to the roar of dragons, the cheers of friends, and the pulse of a boy who never truly fought alone. Number 20. Fred and George's Secret Passages. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the film builds toward one of its most unforgettable sequences, the chaotic rebellion against Dolores Umbridge, where Fred and George Weasley unleash a storm of fireworks that turn the rigid corridors of Hogwarts into a carnival of defiance. The scene is a triumph of cinematic spectacle, but for readers who know J.K. Rowling's books intimately, there is a subtle layer of detail woven into the action. The twins are not simply pranksters throwing Catherine wheels and dragons into the air. They are also moving through Hogwarts in ways that seem impossible, slipping from one part of the castle to another with uncanny ease. The camera does not linger on it, nor do the characters remark upon it, but attentive fans recognize the hidden key. Fred and George had mastered the Marauder's map and knew the school's secret passageways better than anyone alive. When Umbridge and her inquisitorial squad are trying to suppress the chaos, the twins never seem to get cornered. At one moment, they are in the Great Hall, their fireworks bursting above terrified exam takers. In the next, they are by the swamp corridor, laughing as Umbridge shrieks and trips. For a casual viewer, this appears to be nothing more than creative editing. Yet for readers, the explanation is clear. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the Marauder's map is introduced as a magical document showing every person in Hogwarts and most. Crucially, every secret passage hidden in its walls. The text says, It shows every secret passage out of the castle, and we've used them all, as Fred explains to Harry. By the time of Order of the Phoenix, the twins had had the map for years, using it for both pranks and survival, under the ever-watchful eye of the staff. The film hints at this knowledge, but never spells it out. The corridors of Hogwarts are not ordinary hallways. They are shifting, enchanted arteries of a living building, with staircases that move, doors that vanish, and rooms that only appear under certain conditions. For Umbridge, who relies on brute authority and surveillance, this environment is a nightmare. But for Fred and George, it is a playground. Readers remember how, in the third book, they first revealed the existence of the passage under the statue of the one-eyed witch, the one leading to Honeydukes. By the fifth book, such routes had become second nature to them. Rowling describes them as having a sixth sense for the castle's geography, as if they could melt into its walls. The films only show us glimpses, but in those glimpses lies a wink for the faithful. When the camera cuts and the twins appear in a location Umbridge could not possibly have let them reach, it is the Marauder's legacy at work. The rebellion itself is staged as a calculated performance. Fred and George do not merely want to escape Umbridge's grip, they want to humiliate her, to make a spectacle so legendary that students would talk of it for years. In the book, Rowling writes, Fred and George turned to each other and said together, "Let's give her a bit of a send-off, shall we?" That send-off was not possible without intimate knowledge of Hogwarts' internal veins. The film emphasizes their fireworks, but the deeper triumph is the invisibility of their movement. Each burst of chaos seems to happen in multiple corners of the castle at once, like coordinated guerrilla warfare. Fans of the books instantly recognize that this is not random chance. The twins are exploiting shortcuts only they could navigate with such confidence. This detail is crucial because it connects the twins to the Marauders themselves, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, who originally created the map. The Marauders built those tools to outwit authority and bend Hogwarts to their will. Decades later, Fred and George inherit that mantle, showing that the rebellious spirit of mischief did not die with James and Sirius. Rowling carefully layers these connections in the novels. In the film, it is silent background storytelling, a trace for the keen-eyed viewer. When George slides out of sight and reappears seconds later at a balcony overlooking the mayhem, it is a gesture of continuity between two generations of pranksters. The film refuses to break its rhythm to explain, but it rewards fans who remember every hidden tunnel under the castle. The chaos against Umbridge is also a kind of symbolic reclamation of Hogwarts itself. Under her rule, the castle is turned into a prison, filled with rules nailed to the walls like shackles. Yet through their mastery of secret corridors, Fred and George reveal that the school is older and more mysterious than any one tyrant. Rowling emphasizes this in the book when she writes, "Give her hell from us, Peeves." The ghosts, the poltergeist, and even the walls themselves seem to side with the students. The hidden pathways embody that idea. They are physical reminders that Hogwarts was built with secrets, resistant to control, and that knowledge is the greatest weapon against tyranny. The twins' ability to wield that knowledge is a quiet rebellion within the louder one. Consider how, in earlier films, the Marauder's map itself is treated as a prop, a magical parchment used briefly by Harry to sneak around. But in the books, it is practically a character of its own, shaping the adventures of every student who dares use it. By the fifth installment, Fred and George are veterans of its secrets. That explains why, during their departure, they seem untouchable, always 2 steps ahead of Umbridge. When the inquisitorial squad tries to corner them, the twins have already vanished into the walls. When detentions pile up, they slip away through trapdoors and hidden staircases. These moments are not fully explained on screen, but the attentive fan sees the invisible lines connecting book to film. What makes this detail so satisfying is its subtlety. The filmmakers could have added a line about the Marauder's map or shown the twins ducking into a secret door, but they chose not to. Instead, they left breadcrumbs for the most dedicated viewers. It is a gesture of respect, trusting the audience to bring their knowledge of the books into the cinema. The films often compress Rowling's dense lore, yet here they allow a quiet fidelity to shine through. The twins' impossible movement is not a plot hole. It is a deliberate echo of the novels, visible only to those who already know the castle's secrets. Fred and George's expertise in navigation also underscores the tragedy of their eventual fates. Readers know that Fred's life ends in the Battle of Hogwarts, within the very castle he once dominated with laughter. The hidden corridors he loved become battlegrounds, filled with death and destruction. Watching them exploit those same corridors in Order of the Phoenix is bittersweet for anyone aware of what is to come. It turns their fireworks into both a victory and a farewell, a fleeting moment of control before destiny overtakes them. The films never articulate this, but the context from the books deepens every frame. The Marauder's map also plays with the theme of knowledge as power. Harry first uses it for sneaking to Hogsmeade, but Fred and George elevate it into an art form. They transform forbidden knowledge into liberation, undermining an authority figure who thrives on ignorance and obedience. The map is never mentioned in their cinematic exit, but it hovers invisibly over the sequence, like another unseen character urging them on. That absence speaks volumes. It is the kind of omission that turns a casual scene into a treasure hunt for fans. Dolores Umbridge herself becomes the perfect foil for this secret knowledge. She is obsessed with order, surveillance, and bureaucracy. Her walls of proclamations are meant to leave no space for disobedience, yet the Weasley twins use the living, breathing architecture of Hogwarts to mock her. Their mastery of hidden corridors is proof that there are always places beyond the reach of rules. The audience may only see her flailing amid fire-breathing dragons of fireworks, but fans of the novels perceive something sharper, a battle between authoritarianism and hidden resistance, waged through knowledge of the castle's soul. One cannot underestimate the symbolic weight of secret corridors in the Harry Potter universe. From the Chamber of Secrets to the Room of Requirement, hidden places embody the duality of Hogwarts as both a sanctuary and a labyrinth of danger. Fred and George's use of them ties their rebellion to that larger tradition. They are not merely pranksters. They are heirs to the castle's deepest mysteries, wielding architecture itself as a weapon. When the films allow them to vanish and reappear with impossible precision, it is not sloppy editing, but a storytelling nod, invisible to those who never read beyond the screen. Even the way the twins exit Hogwarts reflects their command of these secrets. In the book, they fly out of the castle on broomsticks after wreaking havoc, leaving behind a swamp that even Professor Flitwick admires. But before they take flight, they move like shadows through the building, stirring chaos in multiple directions. The film captures the fire, but not the footsteps. Yet the careful viewer can sense that those footsteps travel through forgotten doors and twisting staircases, the invisible arteries of the Marauder's map. This detail also enriches the films for those who revisit them. On a first watch, the fireworks are dazzling, but on a second, after recalling the map and the twins' expertise, the sequence gains depth. It becomes less about spectacle and more about inheritance. The way knowledge passes from one generation of mischief makers to another, from James Potter and Sirius Black to Fred and George. The invisible corridors are the connective tissue of that inheritance, never shown outright, but always present for those who know where to look. Ultimately, the Weasley twins' impossible movement through Hogwarts is one of those cinematic secrets designed for the initiated. It reflects the enduring magic of Rowling's world, the way every detail connects across books and films, rewarding loyalty and memory. For the casual viewer, the scene is chaos and laughter. For the fan who remembers the Marauder's map, it is a hidden thread, a reminder that Hogwarts is alive with secrets, and that Fred and George were its last true cartographers before the final war engulfed it. Their legacy lives in those hidden steps, invisible but unforgettable, a wink from page to screen. Number 21. The Restored Cracked Portrait. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, there is a corridor scene that passes quickly, almost too quickly for the untrained eye. On the wall, among the endless rows of portraits that decorate Hogwarts, one stands out for a single moment. The frame is cracked, the paint appears burned, and the face within is nearly unrecognizable. To most viewers, it seems like a random set detail, perhaps a touch of gothic atmosphere added by the production team. Yet for those who carry the memory of J.K. Rowling's words and the weight of her descriptions, this detail resonates differently. It is not a simple damaged painting. It is evidence of the castle itself bearing scars from the basilisk's attack. And more importantly, it is evidence of the quiet resilience of Hogwarts, a living, breathing place where even the portraits participate in its history. By the time Alfonso Cuarón's Prisoner of Azkaban arrived on screen, something had changed. The same portrait that had once seemed broken, destroyed by fire, or the venom of the monster, appeared whole again. The frame had been repaired, the burn marks erased, the subject within restored to life. For the casual moviegoer, it was continuity. The set decorator had simply provided a new prop. But fans of the books knew better. They had read about the peculiar nature of Hogwarts' magical paintings, portraits that talked, moved, and carried fragments of the people they depicted. They remembered how these enchanted artworks could not be compared to ordinary oil and canvas because, as Dumbledore once remarked, Hogwarts is alive, with a spirit of its own. The restored portrait was not merely replaced. It had healed, much like the rest of the castle after every catastrophe that scarred its ancient walls. The detail may feel small, but within the mythology of Harry Potter, it is monumental. Portraits were never background dressing in Rowling's books. They were guardians of doors, like the fat lady who barred entrance to Gryffindor Tower. They were advisors, such as Phineas Nigellus Black, who could slip between frames to carry messages across distant locations. They were companions, comedic relief, and sometimes even spies. In the Deathly Hallows, Harry himself relies on the portrait of Dumbledore's sister, Ariana, who conceals the entrance to the Room of Requirement. These figures were part of the castle's nervous system, always alive, always participating. To see a portrait broken, as in Chamber of Secrets, was to glimpse injury not only to stone and paint, but to the living organism of Hogwarts itself. Rowling wrote about this living quality of the castle in subtle ways. In The Order of the Phoenix, Harry describes the portraits of old headmasters that hang in Dumbledore's office. They were not as asleep as they pretended. Harry was sure of it. Every now and then he could see an eye twitch or an ear moving, as though they were listening intently to what was being said. These words remind the reader that the paintings are never fully passive. They are extensions of memory, guardians of tradition, and fragments of soul preserved on canvas. When the basilisk prowled through Hogwarts in the second book, its gaze turned victims to stone and caused destruction in its path. A portrait, even half alive, would not have been immune to such trauma. The filmmakers understood this, though they never drew explicit attention to it. The cracked and burned portrait was a silent acknowledgement that the basilisk's presence had consequences beyond petrified students and shattered nerves. The creature wounded the very skin of Hogwarts. A child reading the book may have noticed how often Rowling described the castle as if it were alive, staircases moving of their own accord, doors refusing to open unless approached properly, suits of armor muttering and clanking. The damaged portrait on film carried that same idea into visual form, and when, in the following movie, the portrait had been restored, it became a quiet reassurance that Hogwarts would always repair itself, much like a phoenix rising from ashes. The significance deepens when one recalls that the magical world had its own ways of healing. Broken bones could be mended by Madame Pomfrey in seconds. Shattered wands were harder to fix, but not impossible. Paintings, however, were not described in detail when it came to repair, yet we know they could be. In The Half-Blood Prince, after the battle at the Astronomy Tower, the fat lady is said to have shrieked herself hoarse, and the castle's portraits were in uproar. Later, in The Deathly Hallows, McGonagall commands the headmaster portraits to assist in the defense of Hogwarts, and they obey without hesitation. If these figures could participate so fully, then restoring them after damage was not merely aesthetic. It was a moral necessity. The portrait in Prisoner of Azkaban looked whole because the castle and its keepers would never leave one of their guardians broken. One could argue this attention to detail reveals how much the filmmakers respected Rowling's lore. Alfonso Cuarón was known for infusing atmosphere into every frame. He understood that Hogwarts was not just a school, but a character in its own right. The repaired portrait became part of that character's arc. Just as Harry himself was scarred and healed, so too was the castle. The walls remembered, the portraits remembered, and the viewer, if attentive enough, could share in that memory. It was an unspoken bond between reader and filmmaker, a nod that said, "We know the castle lives, and we know you know it too." Consider the emotional weight of portraits in Rowling's narrative. After Dumbledore's death in The Half-Blood Prince, Harry walks into the headmaster's office. The painted figures of the old headmasters and headmistresses were all awake and talking, their voices a low murmur in the candlelit room. Dumbledore's own portrait hung behind the desk, already present, already participating in the continuity of Hogwarts history. This moment confirmed what fans had long suspected. Portraits did not die, but endured. They bore the memory of their subjects into eternity. The broken portrait in Chamber of Secrets then becomes more than a damaged object. It is the wounding of memory itself, the silencing of a voice that should never fall silent. The act of repair, glimpsed in Prisoner of Azkaban, can thus be read as restoration of voice, a revival of heritage. The books taught us that history mattered at Hogwarts. Ghosts told their tales, staircases creaked with ancient grudges, portraits advised with wisdom collected over centuries. To repair a portrait was to preserve this heritage. The filmmakers, by showing the once broken painting restored, gave fans a whisper of that same principle. It was continuity, not only in visual design, but in the philosophy of the magical world. Even more striking is the way this small background detail connects with the final battle of the series. In the Deathly Hallows, after the destruction wrought by Voldemort and his Death Eaters, Hogwarts lies in ruins. Stone is cracked, towers are fallen, and bodies rest among the rubble. Yet when Harry walks through the Great Hall afterward, the survivors gather not in despair, but in determination. The castle will be rebuilt. The portraits, like their human counterparts, will return to their places. The repaired portrait glimpsed years earlier in Prisoner of Azkaban becomes a foreshadowing of this larger theme. Destruction is never final at Hogwarts. There is always restoration, always resilience, always memory preserved. Fans who notice this continuity often describe it as a reward for their attentiveness. It is one thing to read about a living castle, quite another to catch it expressed silently in film language. The basilisk may have turned Colin Creevey to stone, but the filmmakers ensured that viewers saw a portrait damaged as well, proof that the monster touched everything. When that same portrait returned, whole and unscarred, it signaled healing, not just for individuals, but for the institution itself. Hogwarts survives, and the spirit of magic survives with it. This attention to subtle lore explains why Harry Potter has inspired decades of devotion. Readers knew that every moving staircase, every muttering suit of armor, every whispering portrait mattered. Filmmakers who honored these details strengthened the bridge between page and screen. The repaired portrait is not famous, not highlighted in fan theories, not discussed with the same intensity as Snape's memories or Dumbledore's secrets, but it holds a place in the mythology for those who looked closely because it confirms that nothing in Hogwarts was ever random, not even the shadows on the wall. The strength of Rowling's universe lies in such continuity. A child could pass by a broken portrait without noticing, but an attentive fan would pause and remember how often paintings had come to Harry's aid. They would think of Sir Cadogan and his reckless bravery, of the fat lady's indignant shrieks, of Phineas Nigellus smirking from his frame. They would realize that to leave a portrait broken would be to erase part of Hogwarts' identity. The filmmakers, by repairing it, assured viewers that identity endured. It was an act of faith in the magic itself, silent but resonant. In the end, the cracked portrait that healed is not a trivial Easter egg. It is a story in miniature, a visual parable about survival. Hogwarts, like Harry, endured wounds but always found the strength to mend. Just as Harry bore his lightning-shaped scar as a symbol of pain and triumph, so too did the castle carry its scars until time and magic repaired them. The detail asks nothing of the viewer except attention, but for those who gave it, the reward was a deeper understanding of the living world Rowling created. And perhaps that is why fans continue to search the films for such moments. Not because they change the story, but because they remind us that the story is alive, even in the corners of the screen. Number 22. The Invisibility Cloak and its Buttons. In the first film adaptation of J.K. Rowling's story, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the magical objects introduced to the audience shaped the way millions would imagine the wizarding world for years to come. Among them, the Invisibility Cloak held special weight. Not just another tool in a wizard's arsenal, it was one of the Deathly Hallows, an heirloom passed down through generations of the Potter family, and one of the most mysterious magical items described in the original books. When the moment arrives on screen, when Harry receives the cloak on Christmas morning, the film presents what looks like a simple garment, plain and flowing, yet glimmering faintly in the candlelight. Most casual viewers never stop to examine its fabric closely. Yet for readers of the book who remembered the original description, one tiny detail stood out: the presence of small shining buttons at the collar of the cloak. The description in the novel could have easily been overlooked. Rowling writes in Philosopher's Stone, it was a cloak made of silvery material that looked like liquid silver. It was strange to the touch, like water woven into cloth, and it had silver fastenings. That last phrase, silver fastenings, is rarely highlighted in discussions of the cloak. The books often stress its magical properties, its ability to render the wearer invisible, its significance in wizarding legend, but those minute details of design were left to the imagination of the reader. The filmmakers, however, chose not to ignore them. They added little round buttons to the top of Harry's cloak, and though the camera rarely lingers on them, the attentive eye can spot the gleam of silver when Harry first drapes the cloak over his shoulders. For many fans, this detail represented a subtle signal that the costume designers had done their homework. Judianna Makovsky, the costume designer for the first two films, was known for balancing the practical demands of a film set with the need to remain faithful to Rowling's descriptions. The invisibility cloak could have been depicted as a purely ethereal piece of fabric, perhaps even generated by visual effects alone. Instead, Makovsky created a tangible garment, heavy enough to move realistically and designed with the specific touch described in the book. The inclusion of the buttons at the collar was not simply decorative. It was a direct nod to the phrasing "silver fastenings" that Rowling had written. It was a detail small enough to disappear into the background, but essential for fans who cherished every scrap of text from the novels. The significance of such a choice becomes clear when one considers how film adaptations often smooth over or discard details from their literary sources. Countless fantasy adaptations have been accused of ignoring the original author's language in favor of cinematic convenience. Here, however, the design team made an effort to align their work with Rowling's prose. When Harry pulls the cloak around himself in the Gryffindor common room and vanishes for the first time, the camera angle is high, showing the fabric slip over his shoulders. The gleam of the fastenings is visible for only a heartbeat. It is the sort of thing that a first-time viewer focused on the magical disappearance would never notice. Yet a reader who had grown up with the phrase "silver fastenings" embedded in their imagination might suddenly smile in recognition. The placement of those buttons also speaks to a deeper truth about the cloak as an heirloom. In Rowling's mythology, this was not a cheaply made magical trinket. It was a relic, crafted with care, designed to endure centuries of use. Its silver fastenings gave it a sense of permanence, of craftsmanship, reminding us that magical objects in the wizarding world are not conjured out of thin air, but made with artistry and skill. In the books, Harry notices how smooth, cool, and strangely alive the cloak feels when he first touches it. On screen, the shimmering material and silver fastenings combine to give the audience the impression of something both practical and enchanted. One can argue that this choice set the tone for the way the films would treat magical objects more broadly. The Sorcerer's Stone itself is given a crystalline, glowing design. The wands are distinct in shape and texture. The Sorting Hat appears battered and ancient. The invisibility cloak, with its understated buttons, reminded viewers that magic in Rowling's world is grounded in the physical. It is not only about the spells spoken or the power unleashed, but about the way these artifacts are made and carried through time. The presence of fastenings makes the cloak feel like a piece of clothing that might truly exist, rather than a flimsy stage prop. It is worth pausing to think about how small details like this are received differently by various audiences. To a young child watching the film, the invisibility cloak is just a marvelous item that allows Harry to sneak around Hogwarts. To the devoted book reader, however, seeing the cloak fastened with small silver buttons becomes a reassurance. It whispers that the filmmakers respect the text, that they read carefully, that the magic of the written word has not been completely lost in translation to the screen. For many, these are the kinds of details that build trust between an adaptation and its audience. There is also something almost poetic about the way these buttons glimmer. They are not the focus of the shot. They are never called out in dialogue. Yet they appear precisely when Harry is at the cusp of uncovering hidden truths. On Christmas night, when he first tries the cloak, the faint sparkle of the buttons is visible just before he vanishes. Later, as he uses the cloak to explore the restricted section of the library, that same fastening at his throat is glimpsed in the torchlight. The audience might not consciously register the significance, but subconsciously, the buttons become a visual marker of the cloak's identity. This attention to detail is all the more remarkable when contrasted with later films, where the cloak is treated more casually. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Alfonso Cuarón's darker visual style shifts attention away from costume detail. The cloak is often seen as a flowing fabric, and the fastenings are less visible. In Deathly Hallows, where the cloak's true nature as a hallow is revealed, the narrative weight overshadows the garment's physical design. Only in the first film do we see that early, careful touch of fidelity, the shining fastenings, faithful to Rowling's line in the text. It is easy to dismiss such minutiae as trivial, but for fans of Rowling's work, the joy of discovery lies in these tiny echoes between page and screen. Reading the book, one imagines Harry's fingers brushing against cool silver as he clasps the cloak around his shoulders. Watching the film, one sees Daniel Radcliffe do precisely that, the silver glint briefly captured on camera. The two mediums meet in that fleeting moment. It is the kind of synchronicity that makes adaptations feel authentic, even when the larger arcs inevitably condense or alter elements of the story. The invisibility cloak's buttons also highlight the difference between Rowling's descriptive precision and the visual shorthand of cinema. A novel can linger on the sensation of fabric, the strange coolness, the mysterious gleam. A film has only seconds to convey the same richness. The choice of fastening becomes a shorthand. By showing the silver buttons, the film signals everything the book described without needing dialogue or exposition. It is the visual equivalent of a line of prose, distilled into an object the viewer can absorb in a single glance. What makes this especially resonant is the context of the moment when Harry first receives the cloak. It is his first Christmas at Hogwarts, a time when he is learning that he belongs in the wizarding world, when he is beginning to discover his family's legacy. The cloak is more than a gift. It is a link to his father, James Potter. The silver fastenings emphasize this sense of inheritance. They are not shiny adornments for a costume, but enduring marks of a family treasure. They suggest that James himself once clasped the same buttons before slipping through the corridors of Hogwarts, just as Harry does now. Even the way the buttons are filmed seems deliberate. When Harry holds up the cloak and the camera lingers on his astonished face, the fastenings catch a glint of candlelight. The magic of the cloak is primarily in its invisibility, yet the buttons, ironically, are the most visible part of the garment. They remain fixed, tangible, a reminder that even the most wondrous magical object has a physical presence. It is an almost symbolic gesture, No matter how much of himself Harry conceals beneath the cloak, some part of him, his connection to his father, his heritage, remains visible in the form of those fastenings. Over time, as the series expanded and grew darker, fans often debated which details from the books were best preserved on screen and which were sacrificed. Many lamented the absence of characters like Peeves or the changes to Dumbledore's personality, but few noticed how, in that very first film, the filmmakers had captured one of Rowling's most subtle flourishes. The invisibility cloak's silver fastenings may not shape the plot, but they represent the devotion to text that book lovers crave. They remind us that the smallest touches can carry as much magic as the grandest spells. Perhaps that is why the cloak's buttons remain a favorite discovery among those who revisit the film with the book fresh in their mind. It is not a matter of plot, nor of spectacle, but of faithfulness to language. It demonstrates that someone in the costume department pored over Rowling's prose, paused at the phrase silver fastenings, and thought, yes, we must include that. And by doing so, they allowed generations of fans to experience the quiet thrill of recognition, the joy of seeing the words on the page mirrored on the screen. Number 23. Draco's Scarred Hand. In the dimly lit corridors of Hogwarts, the 6th year of Harry Potter carried with it an atmosphere heavy with secrets, alliances, and betrayals. Among those secrets lay a small but telling detail that only the most attentive fans, particularly readers of J.K. Rowling's books, could notice when watching the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. During the tense scene in the Room of Requirement, also referred to as the Room of Hidden Things, Draco Malfoy confronts Harry with a wand raised in trembling defiance. For just a brief moment, the camera lingers on his left hand, and what appears there is more than a random choice by the filmmakers. A thin scar, barely visible, rests on his skin, an artistic whisper of his earlier brush with the curse that nearly cost him his life. Sectum Sempra. To those unfamiliar with the deeper layers of the narrative, this might seem like nothing more than an accidental detail, perhaps even a trick of the lighting. Yet for readers who remember the shocking moment in the book when Harry casts that spell in desperation, it becomes a haunting reminder. Rowling's prose lingers on the blood and horror of the incident. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. The description was brutal, painting a vivid picture of the dark power Harry had unleashed, and the resulting scar on Draco's arm in the film acts as a silent echo of that unforgettable passage. The scar is important not because of its physicality alone, but because it encapsulates Draco's trajectory during this particular year. Gone was the smug, untouchable boy who had sneered at Harry on the Hogwarts Express. In his place stood a teenager crushed by the weight of expectations from Lord Voldemort and tormented by his own failures. The wound inflicted by Harry was not just flesh deep. It was a symbolic gash into the image Draco projected to the world. Where once he seemed untouchable, this scar told the truth, that he was vulnerable, that he could be broken, and that the war between light and dark was leaving its marks not only on Harry, but also on his enemies. The filmmakers could easily have chosen to ignore this aspect. After all, the confrontation in the bathroom where the curse was cast is memorable enough without needing follow-up. Yet the choice to subtly include the scar demonstrates a deliberate decision to weave together the continuity between book and screen. It acknowledges the depth of Rowling's storytelling. The scar is an unspoken acknowledgement to loyal readers. The film has not forgotten what Harry did to Draco, nor how dangerous the Half-Blood Prince's legacy truly was. In this sense, the camera's brief focus on Draco's hand becomes a small reward for attentive fans, a visual nod to those who know the darker history. The Sectum Sempra spell itself carries weight that far surpasses the duel in the bathroom. It was a curse invented by Severus Snape in his youth, one that Harry discovered scrawled in the margins of the potions textbook. The words seemed innocuous enough until Harry, cornered and desperate, cast them without thought for consequence. "For enemies," the note in the book had said. And indeed, Harry unleashed it in a moment of panic against someone who had long been his adversary. But the aftermath stripped away all illusion. The rushing torrent of blood shocked Harry into the realization that the magic he wielded could not be undone with a simple wave of a wand. It required Snape's frantic countercurse to staunch the flow and prevent Draco from dying on the floor of the bathroom tiles. Draco carried more than a scar after that event. He carried shame, fear, and a renewed sense of isolation. In the book, Rowling notes how Draco began to avoid the gaze of others, retreating into himself. Struggling with the impossible task Voldemort had given him, the wound became a metaphor for his state of mind. The scar we glimpse in the film is the faint shadow of that pain, but it symbolizes the heavy burden of adolescence in a time of war when even those branded as villains were children caught in circumstances beyond their control. The filmmakers, by embedding this subtle detail, invited viewers to remember that Draco's story was not one of clear-cut evil, but of a boy scarred both inside and out. When one considers the larger narrative arc, this scar also links Draco more closely with Harry himself. Both bore marks that tied them to violence and destiny. Harry's lightning-shaped scar, forever tied to Voldemort's curse, is the symbol of his identity. Draco's Sectum Sempra scar, less visible but no less significant, binds him to Harry in an unwanted kinship. They are both teenagers forced to carry the physical consequences of battles they neither sought nor understood fully. Their scars serve as emblems of the way war spares no one, stripping away innocence and forcing choices far beyond their years. The visual storytelling of the film relies heavily on these moments of detail. A passing glance, a flicker of recognition, a scar that whispers of a history otherwise left unspoken. These are tools that bridge the gap between text and cinema. The choice to highlight Draco's scar is one such bridge, transforming what might have been forgotten into a reminder of the book's intensity. The fact that most casual viewers missed it makes it even more precious to those who noticed, much like a secret between the filmmakers and the readers. It's the kind of detail that builds loyalty, making fans feel seen and acknowledged. In discussing this, one cannot ignore the role of Tom Felton, whose performance as Draco grew in nuance with each film. By the sixth installment, his portrayal carried an edge of fragility beneath the arrogance. His gestures, glances, and yes, the positioning of his hand in that scene allowed the scar to become not just makeup, but a piece of character. It is as though Draco, even in trying to intimidate Harry, betrays his past, his body unable to hide what he endured. The scar becomes a silent confession, an unwilling testament to the violence that shaped him. This choice by the filmmakers also deepens the interpretation of the Half-Blood Prince as a story about consequences. Harry's discovery of the potions book seemed, at first, like a gift. The annotations improved his abilities, gave him confidence, and earned him recognition in class. Yet, with the Sectum Sempra spell, that gift turned into a curse. The scar on Draco's arm is the embodiment of that duality, the tangible reminder that shortcuts and dark knowledge come at a terrible cost. It stands in contrast to Harry's usual victories, which often carried triumph. This time, victory brought only horror, guilt, and a permanent mark on someone else's body. The literary power of scars in Rowling's universe cannot be overstated. They serve as markers of history, symbols of survival, and reminders of the weight of choices. Harry's forehead, Mad-Eye Moody's face, Bill Weasley's wounds from Fenrir Greyback, all are physical signs that the wizarding world is one in which battles leave visible consequences. Draco's Sectum Sempra scar aligns him with this tradition, quietly placing him among those forever changed by violence. The fact that the film preserves this detail demonstrates its respect for the thematic fabric of the series. Fans who cherish such details often note them with pride, as if discovering hidden treasures. Online discussions frequently highlight the scar, with readers pointing out its significance and drawing attention to how fleeting yet powerful it is. These observations remind us of how fandom thrives on the blending of mediums. A book may describe, a film may show, and together they create a layered experience where even the smallest detail resonates with meaning. Draco's scar becomes not only a part of his character, but a testament to the dedication of those who look closely. The haunting nature of the Sectum Sempra scene itself ensures that the scar's presence lingers in the imagination. The bathroom duel, with its splashing water, blinding light, and sudden spray of blood, is one of the most shocking moments in the 6th book. Harry's horror at what he had done, his panicked attempts to help, the arrival of Snape, the stunned silence of Draco, all these elements combine to leave a scar, not only on Draco, but on the reader as well. Seeing that faint line on his arm later in the film is like seeing that memory resurface, proof that trauma does not vanish simply because the plot has moved on. Ultimately, the scar on Draco's arm is a reminder that Harry Potter's world is one where even the smallest details matter. It is a universe built on the weight of history, where every choice leaves a trace, and every scar tells a story. The scar is a quiet nod to the readers who remember, who understand the full force of Sectum Sempra, and who see in that thin line on Draco's arm the echo of blood, fear, and the undeniable truth that in war, no one remains unmarked. Number 24. House Elves Behind the Scenes. In the dimly lit chaos of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, the trio staggers into the cafe on Tottenham Court Road, bruised from their narrow escape at the wedding. The camera follows them in, tension running through every frame, and for a brief moment, the door shuts behind them without a hand touching it. To most viewers, it is just another expression of the magical world, a background enchantment that does not need explaining. Yet readers of J.K. Rowling's books, who are attuned to the subtleties of wizarding life, recognize something deeper at play. That small detail is not merely a spell for atmosphere, but a quiet nod to the hidden workforce that Rowling embedded throughout her universe. The house elves who keep wizarding homes running in ways often invisible to the casual observer. The novels reveal house elves not as rare curiosities, but as ubiquitous presences in wizarding households. Rowling describes them as deeply bound to service, often unseen, moving with silent efficiency to cook, clean, and repair. At Hogwarts, Harry discovers that the abundant feasts appearing in the Great Hall are not conjured by professors, but prepared by 100 house elves, working in the kitchens day and night. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. They carry dishes through hidden passages and maintain the school so seamlessly that most students, until Hermione's obsessive investigations, remain oblivious to their existence. Rowling deliberately hides them in plain sight, teaching readers to notice the quiet hands that make the wizarding world function. That knowledge transforms how a reader perceives a seemingly minor cinematic moment. The closing of the cafe door in Deathly Hallows can be dismissed as a cinematic trick, but through the lens of the books, it becomes an act of service, an echo of Kreacher, the Black family's elf. Rowling tells us that when Harry inherits Grimmauld Place, Kreacher remains bound to it. His presence is often described in subtle ways, a low muttering like a family of angry wasps, and he appears at odd times tidying or observing. It is not difficult to imagine him shadowing Harry even. Beyond the boundaries of that ancient house, keeping watch in his own strange manner, lending unseen assistance when needed. Kreacher himself is one of Rowling's most remarkable minor characters, a study in bitterness and loyalty. In Order of the Phoenix, he sabotages Harry by betraying Sirius, yet by Deathly Hallows he undergoes a transformation after Harry shows him kindness and respect. Harry even gives him Regulus Black's locket, and Rowling writes that Kreacher bowed so low that his nose brushed the carpet. Such details teach the attentive reader that house elves are not passive magical tools, but complex beings whose devotion is rooted in deep, binding magic and the rare gift of affection. With this understanding, the closed door in the film gains resonance. It is not just magic, it is devotion enacted quietly in the shadows. The house elves' magic is distinct from wizard magic, something Rowling emphasized throughout the series. Dobby apparates inside Hogwarts when wizards cannot. Winky binds herself to tasks with compulsive loyalty, and Kreacher performs enchantments that surprise even seasoned wizards. Elf magic is different, Dobby explains in Chamber of Secrets, and Rowling never lets the reader forget that this separate tradition operates alongside wizardry. Thus, when a door shuts or an object shifts in the films without a visible wand, the book reader wonders, was this deliberate elf magic rather than a wizard's charm? It reframes the environment, layering a hidden world beneath the obvious one. The Tottenham Court Road sequence is not the only time when films inadvertently gesture toward house elf activity. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry and the Weasleys enter Grimmauld Place to find it dusty but functioning. The fireplace crackles, the furniture is arranged, and yet no human hand is shown maintaining it. Rowling explicitly credits Creature's unseen labor in the novels, noting how he mutters about his mistress as he scuttles through the corridors. The films, however, often excise him, leaving behind traces without explanation. For viewers steeped in the novels, those traces act like ghosts of missing characters, whispers that remind us of how much the house elves' presence shaped the texture of Rowling's wizarding world. This tension between film and book highlights the challenge of adaptation. The films, bound by runtime and pacing, remove secondary figures like Winky, the Crouch family's elf, whose tragic arc in Goblet of Fire provides crucial moral shading. Winky, unjustly blamed and dismissed, sinks into despair and alcoholism, embodying the darker consequences of a society that treats elves as property. Without her, the films risk presenting elves only as comic relief or background quirks. Yet Rowling's readers carry these absences into the screenings, filling gaps with knowledge of invisible characters who might, at any moment, be responsible for a moving chair or a shutting door. The elusiveness of elves also mirrors Rowling's theme of overlooked labor. In the books, the very invisibility of house elves critiques the blindness of the wizarding elite, who benefit from their service without recognizing their sentience. Hermione's society for the promotion of elfish welfare is mocked relentlessly by her peers, but her indignation is one of the rare moral outcries in a culture otherwise indifferent to exploitation. The Tottenham Court Road door becomes, for readers who remember this, a silent emblem of labor unacknowledged. Viewers who never open the books see a flourish of magic. Readers see an unpaid servant acting out of duty and perhaps even affection. One of Rowling's most poignant house elf passages appears when Creature leads the assault in the Battle of Hogwarts. The house elves of Hogwarts, armed with knives, cleavers, and pokers, charged into the fray, screaming and brandishing their weapons. Their collective uprising, usually hidden, erupts into open defiance against Voldemort. For those who recall this scene, the earlier hints of unseen doors and tidied rooms take on retrospective power. The elves are not only servants, but potential warriors, waiting for the moment when their loyalty to a home transforms into ferocity against its enemies. In light of this, the film's understated visual cues become tiny foreshadowings of the greater role they play in the saga. The artistry of Rowling's detail lies in how she plants these small traces. A plate polished, a bed made, a mutter in the shadows. Each clue builds the sense of a household alive with invisible energy. Harry saw a Creature shuffling past with a basket of laundry, muttering to himself. Rowling notes casually in Half-Blood Prince. Such sentences train the reader to expect movement at the edge of vision, sounds behind walls, and doors closing by unseen hands. When a film director reproduces such an effect without explanation, the book reader experiences it differently, haunted by the knowledge of who or what might be responsible. It is worth noting that Rowling rarely describes the mechanics of elf work in detail. She does not catalog the spells they use or the rituals they follow. Instead, she relies on hints, on the atmosphere of rooms that maintain themselves, on the peculiar efficiency of households where no one seems to do the work. This deliberate vagueness amplifies the mystery and allows readers to project elves into any unexplained phenomenon. Thus, the Tottenham Court Road door becomes one more in a series of small mysteries resolved only by those who carry the memory of Rowling's more intricate world building. The films inevitably streamline this complexity. They emphasize the hero's journey and the visible battles, sometimes at the expense of the quiet rhythms of daily magical life. Yet in their rush, they leave behind details like closing doors, details that function as windows into the larger text. The dedicated fan who remembers Winky's tears or Creature's grudging bow perceives a secret parallel film playing beneath the one on screen, populated by the shadows of characters omitted but never entirely erased. For many, that is the pleasure of being both a reader and a viewer, the layering of interpretations, the act of seeing more than what is presented. In that small cafe moment, one person sees a trick of cinematography, another sees Creature's invisible hand pulling the door shut, still bound by ancient loyalty. The richness of Rowling's world permits such readings, where every unexplained motion is not a gap, but an invitation to remember, to fill in, to imagine the unseen actors at work. What remains most striking is the emotional dimension that readers bring to these interpretations. After following Creature's arc from spiteful betrayer to grieving servant, after mourning Dobby's sacrifice, here lies Dobby, a free elf. The idea of unseen elves behind closed doors becomes not just clever world-building, but a reminder of characters who mattered deeply. It is a kind of haunting, where loyalty, service, and loss echo through the mundane details of film mise-en-scène, rewarding those who carry the weight of the books with them into the theater.